Have you ever had the feeling of being surrounded by people but feeling completely invisible? Like no one really sees you? As if your presence is ignored, even when you do everything to be noticed? Maybe no one told you this clearly, but the truth is harsh. People only ignore you because you, without realizing it, allowed it. And no, this isn't about guilt. It's about conscience. Life teaches us, little by little, to keep quiet, not to disturb, giving in. And while you believe you're being understanding, kind, easygoing, the world is learning to put you last. You cancel yourself out to keep the peace. But who takes care of your own internal war? There comes a time when the body gets tired, when the soul screams, when silence becomes a burden. And it's at this point that you realize no one will rescue you if you continue to accept being ignored. You don't have to live like this. You can turn that key today, now, because everything changes when you understand that being respected begins when you respect yourself first. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video, about how to regain control of your presence, your voice, your emotional dignity. And I invite you from now on to leave it in the comments. When was the last time you felt completely invisible? Tell me, because sometimes what you say here is exactly what someone needed to read to lift themselves up too. Have you ever had that strange feeling of being in a place full of people, but still feeling invisible? As if your presence didn't make a difference to anyone? This hurts, and the worst thing is that most people think this is normal. But let me tell you something that perhaps no one has ever told you clearly. People only ignore you because without realizing it, you allowed them to. And no, that's not guilt. It's conscience. Because when we understand where disrespect comes from, we can change the game. I tell you a story. There was a girl who always did everything for others. He was always available, always saying yes, even when he wanted to say no. Do you know what she got out of it? Nothing but silence. Nobody asked if she was okay. Nobody reciprocated. Until one day, in the middle of a family dinner, she said something and no one listened. As if her voice had gone straight through across the room and disappeared. That day, she realized, I'm the last person on my list. And maybe that's why everyone puts me last too. How many times have you felt this way? How many times have you kept your truth silent just to not bother? How many times have you pretended everything was fine, when inside you were broken? This creates cracks that no one sees. And the more you let this happen, the more invisible you become. Not because you are less, but because you have stopped showing yourself. The world learns to ignore you when you get used to erasing yourself. Now look how crazy it is. When we start to cancel ourselves out, expecting others to value us, we move further and further away from who we really are. It's as if we created a silent version of ourselves just to fit in. But let me ask you something. Have you been feeling like yourself lately? Or have you just adapted, molded yourself, swallowed your words and kept silent for fear of losing others? And this is where the danger lies. Because this type of behavior disguises itself as kindness, but it is self-betrayal. You can be kind, of course, but being kind doesn't mean accepting everything silently. Being good is not being stupid. And if you don't show the world that you have value, the world will treat you as if you don't. It's not people's evil. It's what you allow them to continue seeing. Imagine someone who has a huge light, but lives under a cloth. No one will notice this light. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it is hidden. And look, there's no point in waiting for someone to take that cloth off for you. This is your choice. And maybe, just maybe, this video will be that moment when you decide to lift your head and say, that's enough. I exist, I have value. And if so far you're feeling like this sounds like your story, tell me something. When was the last time you truly felt seen? Put it in the comments. Sometimes your pain is the same as whoever is reading. And just by sharing, you can shine a light on others too. I want you to think fondly about something. How much of your life have you lived trying to be accepted? How much have you shaped your speech, your desires, your essence, just to not bother? Maybe today is the time to ask yourself, is it really worth continuing like this? The truth is simple but powerful. No one will see you clearly if you continue to hide, and no one will truly value you as long as you keep putting yourself at the end of the line. The decision to be seen begins when you decide to stop putting yourself down. And finally, if something here made sense to you, share your vision in the comments. It tells me, do you feel like you have been hiding from yourself? I want to hear you, because when we talk, we reconnect. And sometimes, all someone needs to change their life is to realize that they are not alone in this. And you know what's most curious? That most people don't even realize they're hiding. They think they are being humble, polite, or just trying to keep the peace. But inside, there is a silence that screams. And this cry becomes increasingly difficult to ignore, because at one time or another, you realize, I don't recognize myself anymore. This is where the question that changes everything comes in. Who are you behind this mask you created to survive? Maybe you learned from an early age that you needed to please to be accepted. Maybe someone said that you would only be loved if you were less intense, less sensitive, better behaved. And then, so as not to lose people, you gradually erased yourself. First, he stopped saying what he thought. Then he stopped doing what he liked. And now, you're trying to fit into a role that was never written for you. There are people who live their entire lives being what others expect, and die without ever discovering who they really are. And this isn't drama, it's real. And the worst thing is that the more time you spend acting, the harder it becomes to remember what your true essence was like. Have you ever asked yourself this? What were you like before the criticism, the rejections, the attempts to fit into standards that never made sense? I remember a boy who was always creative, dreamy, full of crazy ideas. But life kept pushing him to be normal. They swallowed his dreams, saying he was too distracted, too strange. He believed. Today he has a good job, a good salary, but he lives with a void that nothing can fill. And when they ask if everything is okay, he smiles and says, yes, everything is great. But inside, he feels like he lost something. To yourself, how many people today are living edited versions of themselves? How many are smiling on social media but crying into their pillows? Society teaches us to fit in, but it doesn't teach us to find ourselves. And then we create characters. One for family, one for work, one for friends. And at the end of the day, we don't even know which one is true anymore. Now tell me, do you feel like you are living as yourself, or as you are expected to be? Comment below, speak from the heart. Sometimes a simple question can awaken truths that were dormant within us. And the crazy thing is that when we start to look inside, fear comes. Fear of disappointing others, fear of being rejected, fear of not being enough the way you really are. But let me tell you something. Have you ever thought that maybe the real problem is continuing to disappoint yourself just to please others? Carl Jung said that what you do not bring to consciousness becomes your destiny. In other words, if you don't recognize the mask you're wearing, you will continue to be controlled by it. And the price for that is high. It's living a whole life out of place. You don't need it anymore. You no longer need to shape yourself to be loved. True love does not require character. It happens when you allow yourself to be whole. And even if it seems difficult at first, you will find it freeing. Because there is no greater peace than being able to be who you are, without apologizing for it. If this is happening inside, don't keep it to yourself. Tell me in the comments, what part of yourself do you feel like you've been hiding from the world? Sometimes just writing you start to take off your mask. And you can bet, other people will see themselves in what you say. Because no one is alone in this fight for reunion. Topic 3. The pain of being someone who is not you. And when you realize you're living a character, it hurts. Because a conflict begins to arise within you. On the one hand, the desire to be true, to breathe in peace, to stop acting. On the other, the fear of losing everything he built based on this character. And this is where a lot of people get lost. They are stuck between the desire to free themselves and the fear of everything falling apart. But the truth is, the more you insist on maintaining a false version of yourself, the more you suffer. I tell you this because perhaps your suffering today does not come from something that others did to you, but rather from something that you have done to yourself every day. Denying yourself and denying your own essence hurts. It's like locking a living part inside a cage and pretending it doesn't exist. It just exists. And she screams. He screams in exhaustion, in anxiety, in emptiness, in the desire to disappear. Have you ever felt this? There's a woman who wrote to me once saying, I'm married, I have kids, a beautiful house, but I feel like I've evaporated. This hurt me to read, because it's exactly what a lot of people experience and don't have the courage to say out loud. She turned, Everything around for everyone but her. And when he stopped to look at himself, he didn't recognize himself. Do you identify with this? The pain of being ignored by others is strong, but the pain of ignoring yourself is even more cruel, because it's silent. Nobody sees, nobody understands, and that's why often no one helps. Have you ever been through something like this? Have you ever felt like screaming on the inside while smiling on the outside? If so, comment here. At what point in your life did you feel like you started to fade away? Maybe this will help other people find themselves too. And do you know why this happens to so many people? Because we were taught to seek acceptance at any cost, to please, to be the good one, the one who doesn't bother, the one who accepts everything. But this type of behavior has a price. You end up creating a prison where the key is on your side, but you don't feel authorized to use it because you're afraid of disappointing the world. But little by little, this fear makes your soul sick because you realize that the more you try to be perfect for others, the more you distance yourself from who you are, and life loses color. The days pass, and they all seem the same. You do what you have to do, but you don't feel anything anymore. Just tiredness. Just a weight that gets bigger and bigger. Carl Jung said that depression is like the lady of the underworld, who drags you inside just so you can find what was forgotten there. Maybe this pain you're feeling is the real you trying to pull you back, reminding you that there is still time to reconnect with who you were, with who you still are, inside, in your deepest silence. You don't need to continue in this role they created for you. Yes, you can start saying no. You can set limits. You can change your mind. You can relearn how to listen to yourself. And believe me, the world may be surprised at first, but whoever is real will stay. And whoever doesn't accept your awakening has never really been there for you. Have you ever wondered what would change if you stopped trying to please everyone? What kind of decisions would you make if you were no longer stuck with the idea of being the good one? Comment below. Let's talk about it. Because when you share, you inspire. And when you breathe in, you heal too. Then, take a deep breath. Remember who you are, not who they said you should be. Life is calling you to return to yourself. And maybe, just maybe, this will be the moment when everything starts to change. Topic 4. When you keep silence, the world forgets you. And the more you try to please everyone, the more you become silent. And when you remain silent, little by little, the world forgets that you are there. It's as if you only existed in half. You give up giving your opinion, taking a position, setting limits. And without realizing it, you stop being the protagonist of your life and become just an extra in other people's stories. This eats away at us because no one can live ignoring their own truth for long. I remember a woman who told me, I got to a point where even when choosing food I said anything is good, not because I really thought it mattered, but because I unlearned how to choose for myself. That messed with me, because that's exactly what happens when you keep silent for a long time. You start to feel like you no longer have the right to choose, to decide, to be heard. You believe that your opinion is a nuisance, an exaggeration, nonsense. But it's not. You have the right to express yourself. You have the right to disagree. You have the right to say, this hurts me, or I don't want this for myself. But if you always swallow what you feel to avoid conflicts, the only conflict that grows and is within you, the anger, the tiredness, the discouragement, everything builds up until it explodes in some way. Sometimes in the form of a crisis, sometimes in the form of illness, sometimes in the form of silence that becomes an absence of self. And do you know what the most dangerous part of all of this is? It's just that the more you accept being ignored, the more people get used to it. And then the cycle begins. They no longer ask you what you want, because they already know that you will accept anything. They no longer invite you to decide because you never really give an opinion. They no longer include you, because you have already excluded yourself. It's cruel, but it's real. I want to ask you a question now, very direct. In what area of your life do you feel like you no longer have a voice? At work? At home? In your relationship? Comment here. Talk about it. Sometimes writing is the first step to recovering that voice that time has silenced. The silence that protects becomes a prison. You start using him as a shield to avoid fights, rejection, judgment. But little by little, he isolates you. And when you see it, you are alone. Not because of the malice of others, but because you hid so much that no one else knew where to find you. And the worst part, maybe you don't even know how to find yourself anymore. Carl Jung said that what we deny submits us, what we accept transforms us. And if you accept that you have allowed yourself to be silenced, it doesn't weaken you, it strengthens you. Because only those who recognize where they have fallen are able to get up with conscience. And from then on, everything changes. His voice returns. Your presence returns. Respect returns. You don't need to shout to be heard, but you need to talk. You need to position yourself. You need to remember that you are too important to continue being ignored. And anyone who doesn't respect your voice may never have really listened to you. And if he never listened, maybe he never deserved you. So answer me in the comments. If today you could say something out loud, without fear of being judged, what would it be? Drop it here. Use this space as the place where you can start to be heard again. Because sometimes a little relief is all the heart needs to remember that it's still alive. Topic 5. If you want to be seen, you need to see yourself first. And perhaps before even trying to be heard by the world, the first step is to listen to yourself. Because if you don't recognize your value, if you don't respect yourself, if you don't prioritize yourself, no one else will do it for you. It's hard to say, but it's real. The way you see yourself teaches others how they should see you. If you keep putting yourself in last place, people will think that's where you deserve to be. And this needs to stop. We learn so many useless things in life, but we are almost never taught the essential thing. That if you don't value yourself, no one will. That if you don't love yourself, no one will fill that hole for you. And the worst thing is that there are a lot of good people, people who have huge hearts, who spend their entire lives being used, discarded, ignored, and don't understand why. The truth is that the world reacts to what you project. And if you project that you accept anything, that's exactly what they'll give you. I remember a woman who worked in a small office. Always willing to help, she worked overtime, solved other people's problems, even brought coffee to her boss. And do you know what she got out of it? More workload and no recognition. Until one day a new colleague was hired, and within a week she had more attention than she had received. In 2 years. Why? Because the new colleague spoke firmly, set limits, and made it clear what she accepted and what she did not accept. A different attitude changes everything. How many times have you accepted less than you deserve just to keep someone close? How many times have you heard a joke about yourself and laughed so as not to spoil the mood? How many times have you let someone talk over you and stayed quiet so as not to seem difficult? Each of these small decisions teaches the world that you accept being erased. And if you don't reverse this, you will continue to be pushed into the shadows. Tell me one thing honestly. When was the last time you treated yourself as a priority? That you firmly said no? That you chose something just because you wanted to, and not because others expected it? Comment below. Maybe it's time to face this question head on. The biggest revolution of your life begins when you decide to put yourself at the center of your own story. And it's not selfishness, it's self-care. When you choose yourself, you show the universe that you are ready to live something greater. Because no one truly prospers if they live outside of themselves. It's like trying to run with your feet stuck. There comes a time when it gets tiring. You don't need to change everything at once, but you can start with a simple gesture. Listen, if you look more kindly, stop mentally repeating that you are not enough. Start treating yourself with the same affection you offer others. Because when you change the way you see yourself, the world starts to treat you differently. Carl Jung said that whoever looks outside dreams, whoever looks inside wakes up. And perhaps all that is missing from your life right now is this awakening. This look inside, this reunion with your essence, with your strength, with your presence. Life changes when you change the way you see yourself. Now answer me with your heart. Have you treated yourself as someone who deserves respect, love, and attention? Or have you left it for later? Post here in the comments. Sometimes writing this down is the first step to starting to truly see yourself. You deserve to be seen. But before anything, you need to see yourself. Because no one can value what you hide. And when you turn on your own light, the right people start to see you too. Topic 6. Change starts with the details you tolerate. And now that you've started to see yourself more clearly, you might start to realize something important. The root of the problem isn't in the big situations, but in the little details that you tolerate every day. It's okay that you say when everything is not okay. It's the maybe you say when you want to say no. It's a forced smile just to keep the mood light. These moments seem small, but they add up. Until one day you wake up feeling like you've lost control of your own life. You know that feeling of living a routine you didn't choose? It usually comes from those silent agreements you make with the world. Agreements where you give up a piece of yourself to avoid conflict, where you accept the minimum thinking it's the maximum you can have. And the problem with this is that over time, you adapt to the pain so much that it starts to feel normal. But let me remind you of one thing. Suffering is not a sign of maturity. Accepting crumbs is not synonymous with humility. There is a man who wrote to me saying that he had always prided himself on being patient. He said yes to everything, helped everyone, never created trouble. But little by little he realized that no one took him seriously. Nobody listened to him. And the worst part, when he finally started imposing limits, he was called rude. This happens when people get used to your lack of limits and find it strange when you decide to really show up. And that's why you need to start looking at the details, the small choices, the small silences, the small discomforts that you swallow, because that's where self-betrayal begins. And whoever betrays himself in the small 1 hour destroys himself in the big ones. It's a silent process, but dangerous. Do you feel like you have missed out on a lot of things that you should have faced? I want to invite you to reflect and comment below. What was the last situation you tolerated in silence, but inside it left you in pieces? Share this with us. Sometimes, just by naming what hurts, you start to heal, and maybe someone in the comments needs to read your story exactly to realize they're not alone. The truth is that life changes when you decide to change what you tolerate, when you realize that the respect you accept is the limit of what you will receive, that the way you position yourself in every detail is what builds your presence in the world, and that no one can value you if you continue to accept what diminishes you. You can start small, a no, where before there was silence. A firmly said, I don't agree. A this hurts me looking into the eyes. These attitudes are seeds, and over time they blossom into respect, into balance, into self-love. Because change doesn't have to be noisy. It just needs to be true. Carl Jung said that what you resist persists, but what you look at changes. So face it, even if you are afraid, even if it's shaking, because every time you take a stand, you rebuild yourself, and every time you shut up, you lose yourself a little more. So answer me honestly, what are the small abuses, disrespects, or injustices that you have allowed in your daily life? Talk to me in the comments. Sometimes what you have been letting go of in silence is stealing from you in silence. And remember, everything you tolerate in silence will one day become a scream inside you. And you don't need to get to that point. You can change now, starting by recognizing that you deserve more, much more than you have accepted. Topic 7. Those who respect themselves don't need to shout. They just need to be present. And when you start to change the small details that you've always tolerated, something powerful happens. Your presence starts to bother those who took advantage of your absence. People who were used to your submissive version begin to find your new no strange. And that's when you need to remember something essential. Those who respect themselves don't need to shout. There's no need to fight. You just need to be truly present. Because authentic presence speaks loudly, even in silence. Someone's true authority does not come from the tone of their voice, but from the firmness of their posture. When you start to position yourself with confidence, without apologizing for existing, people automatically adjust their behavior around you. And this isn't about being tough. It's about being clear. People who are clear with themselves do not allow themselves to be confused by others. I remember a man who said that, after a lifetime of self-effacement, he decided to do something for himself. He went to college at 56 years old. His children thought it was weird. His friends laughed, but he went. On the first day of class, he said something that stood out. I didn't come here to prove anything to anyone. I just got tired of ignoring myself. This is the power of presence. To look at yourself with value, even when the world isn't looking. When you start treating yourself like someone important, the world listens to you differently. And not because you screamed, but because your energy changes. his expression changes. His look says, "I know my worth." And that's when everything starts to reorganize around you. Relationships change. Situations change. The universe responds to the frequency you emit. And if you change inside, you inevitably change what's outside. Now let me ask you something kindly. Have you allowed yourself to take up space? Have you positioned yourself firmly? Or do you still feel like you're always shrinking so as not to bother? Comment below. Let's talk about it, without fear. Because maybe just by recognizing this, you start to make room for a new cycle. People who are always trying to prove that they are too good often feel like they are not good enough. That's why they keep explaining themselves, apologizing for existing, trying to make up for it all the time. But those who see themselves clearly don't need to prove anything. Simply live. Simply allow yourself to be. And this bothers those who benefited from their silence. It's as if you start to walk more steadily. Your steps leave marks. Your words have weight. And even when you choose silence, it speaks loudly. Because now it comes from a place of awareness, not fear. You become a reference, not because you want to, but because you are whole. And whole people inspire transformation even without effort. Carl Jung said that the encounter with the true self is an experience of power. And this power is not about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. It's knowing that you don't need to be aggressive to be firm. You don't need to raise your voice to make yourself heard. You just need to remember who you are and act like it. If today you were to occupy a space with 100% of your truth, without hiding, what would that be like? What would you do differently? How would you behave? Who would you talk to? Comment here. Let's imagine this scenario together. Because when you visualize your freedom, it starts to come closer to you. From the moment you stop shrinking, you begin to expand. And when that happens, those who were used to seeing you small will try to diminish you. But don't be scared. This is a sign that you are growing. And growing up is often uncomfortable. But growing up, above all, frees you. Topic 8. When you change, the whole world starts to respond. And it's amazing how everything around you starts to move differently when you decide to stop hiding. People who were used to your automatic yes start to get uncomfortable. Those who took advantage of their silence feel threatened. And those who really see you, those come even closer. Because when you change from within, the world has no choice. It needs to react. It's as if you are calibrating a new type of frequency. Before, you vibrated in an energy of guilt, fear, and insecurity. Now you emit clarity, firmness, and presence. And that is powerful. You begin to attract new situations, new views, new opportunities. And all this, without needing to scream, without needing to beg, just for being whole. I tell you the case of a girl who decided after years to leave a relationship where she was ignored all the time. She said, "The first week I felt scared. The second I felt peace. And the third, I started to realize that the world was really listening to me for the first time." Because it's like this. When you start treating yourself like someone who matters, the world learns to listen to you more carefully. But of course, at first, this can hurt. Some people will call you selfish. Others will move away. Some will try to manipulate you emotionally, saying that you have changed. And you will have to take a deep breath and understand. Change is necessary. And those who really love you will learn to respect your evolution. Now I want to ask you something direct. Who do you feel would move away if you started to truly take a stand? Comment here. Sometimes, recognizing this already shows you where the real bonds are and where just the ties are. The path of personal truth is not always comfortable, but it is liberating. And as challenging as it may seem at first, the peace that comes afterwards is priceless. When you start living according to who you really are, and not who they expect you to be, the weight lifts, the shine returns, and life starts to make sense again. And the most beautiful thing about it all is that this change starts subtly, in a choice, in a placed limit, in a silence that is no longer submission, but awareness. And from gesture to gesture, you shape a new environment around you, an environment where you can breathe without fear, without guilt, without diminishing yourself. Carl Jung said that real change comes not from trying to become someone else, but from deeply accepting who you are. And that's exactly it. You don't need to become a distant, idealized version of yourself. You just need to stop denying your truth. Your soul knows who you are, Your presence carries a purpose. So tell me honestly, what does the world need to start knowing about you that you have hidden until today? Leave it here in the comments. This space is for that. To be a refuge, but also to be a mirror. And sometimes, when you have the courage to show yourself, you give others permission to do the same. When you change from within, you transform your world. And what used to make you shrink no longer fits you, because those who awaken to their essence never go back to sleep, and whoever finds himself won't get lost again. Topic 9. Choosing to no longer be invisible. And when the world begins to respond to your change, you realize that there is a choice that changes everything. To no longer be invisible. To no longer accept being at the back of the room, in the corner of the conversation, at the end of everyone's emotional line. Because there comes a time when silence no longer protects, it suffocates. And it's at this point that you understand, either you stand up for yourself, or no one will do it in your place. This decision does not come with fireworks. It usually arrives in simple moments. When you say no for the first time without justifying yourself. When you decide to leave a place where you are not valued, or when you simply stop trying to fit in where you have always been cramped. It's subtle but profound. It's at that moment that you stop asking for permission to exist and start to occupy the space that was already yours all along. I heard the story of a young man who said, "My life changed when I stopped asking to be chosen." He realized he was always waiting for validation, at work, in friendships, even in love. But one day he looked in the mirror and said, "I don't need to be chosen anymore. I choose myself." And that's when everything started to turn around. Because when you choose yourself, the world learns to see you with new eyes. Many people live waiting to be noticed, to be recognized, to be remembered, but they forget that the first step is to be present to themselves. You cannot expect someone to value what you yourself ignore, and there's no way to be respected if, every day, you treat yourself as plan B. If you don't assume your space in the world, someone else will occupy it for you, and it may not be in the best way. And now, tell me honestly, in what area of your life do you feel like you have erased yourself to keep the peace? Comment here. This exchange could open a lot of people's eyes, sometimes just by saying it out loud or writing it here in the comments. You start to remember your strength. Choosing to no longer be invisible is an act of courage, and that courage starts on the inside. That's when you realize that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy, that you don't need to please to be loved, that your light bothers those who live in the shadow, but illuminates those who want to grow with you. And on this path, some move away, but the right ones arrive. Carl Jung said that you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. And this darkness is often the life you lead automatically. It's the role you accepted without question. It's the voice you've silenced for so long that you've started to forget what it sounds like. But now that you've seen it, you can't pretend you didn't see it. You can no longer erase yourself just to be accepted. The truth is that you will never be enough for those who benefit from your absence. And it's okay. You were not made to please everyone. You were made to be true. Answer me here in the comments. What would you do today if you were no longer afraid of disappointing anyone? Let it flow. Sometimes, just imagining this scenario, courage begins to rise within you. And when you verbalize it, even in simple words, something inside you realigns. No more hiding. Life is too short to live small. The choice to be seen begins within and is reflected in every step, in every speech, in every silence that now has intention. You are here, and that already says a lot. Topic 10. Whoever remembers who they are stops accepting what they don't deserve. And when you decide to stop being invisible, something starts to reorganize inside you. It's as if every forgotten part begins to return to its place. As if his real identity, the one that had always been suffocated by roles and expectations, was finally breathing again. Because the truth is this: when you remember who you are, you stop accepting anything. You stop begging for crumbs. You begin to act like you know your worth. This process is not about becoming a new person. It's about returning to the essence. Remember what made you vibrate before fear taught you to shut up. Remember how you dreamed before someone convinced you that it wasn't possible. Remember your strength before the world tries to tame you. When this memory awakens, There is no way to accept anything less. You can no longer fit where they shrink you. I remember the story of a boy who, after a long time living to please his father, mother, company, and even his friends, decided to go to therapy. And one day, in the middle of a session, he said, "For the first time, I listened to myself without fear." He realized that he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He just needed to allow himself to live according to what made sense to him. And from that day on, he started saying yes only to things that expanded his soul, and no to everything that made his chest smaller. When you remember who you are, you begin to identify more clearly what hurts you. Things that once seemed normal now hurt. Words that you previously accepted silently now cause repulsion. Relationships that you used to maintain now become too heavy to continue. And all of this isn't a sign that you're becoming too sensitive. It's a sign that you're treating yourself with more respect. And that's why I want to ask you now, what have you accepted in your life just because you forgot who you are? Right? Here in the comments. Sometimes, just by naming it, you begin the healing process. And who knows, maybe your courage will inspire someone who is watching this video right now. When you start to remember who you are, you no longer need permission to be. You stop justifying yourself. Stop diminishing yourself to keep the peace. Stop trying to explain to people who have never made the effort to understand you. And that scares. It scares those who benefit from your doubt. But it frees you. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation, that is, becoming who you are, requires courage, pain, and awareness. And you are already on that path. Every thought that changed, every limit you placed, every small attitude where you chose yourself, all of this already shows that you are remembering who you are. And that is a miracle in itself. But tell me honestly, who are you when no one is looking? Comment here. Let this question resonate with you, because maybe this answer is the beginning of a new life. A life where you don't erase yourself, you don't hide, you don't sabotage yourself anymore. You were not made to live in a mold. You were made to be whole. And now that you're remembering this, don't accept anything that diminishes you anymore, because those who know who they are no longer negotiate their truth.